Meanwhile, yesterday, both the White House and the Department of Homeland Security insisted that President Trump's executive order on immigration is not, in fact, a ban. Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly referred to it instead as, and I quote, a temporary pause, end quote. And here's what Press Secretary Sean Spicer had to say.
He's also made very clear that this is not a Muslim ban. It's not a travel ban. It's a vetting system to keep America safe. It can't be a ban if you're letting 1 million people in. If 325,000 people from another country can't come in, that is by nature not a ban.
No, it's a ban. And Spicer, among others, have in fact called it so. In fact, this is what the president himself said in using the word on Twitter as recently as Monday when he tweeted, and I quote, "If the ban were announced with a 1-week notice, the bad would rush into our country during that week. A lot of bad dudes out there, exclamation point." And just this morning, the president seemed to weigh in on this debate over phrasing, tweeting, and I quote, "Everybody is arguing whether or not it is a ban. Call it what you want. It is keeping bad people with bad intentions out of country, exclamation point." CBS News Foreign Affairs and White House correspondent Margaret Brennan now joins me from the White House. And Margaret, no matter what it's called, and I think everybody, including the folks who are saying that it's not a ban, actually do agree with that it is in fact a ban. The outrage from career diplomats, former U.S. officials, only continues to grow. What can you tell us about it?
Absolutely. Well, as I say in sports, Josh, let's go to the tape or let's go to the Twitter feed and see what's actually been used by candidate Trump and now by President Trump in terms of how to describe this. But on the particulars, look, put aside the fact that nearly half of Americans want action on immigration and actually support the president's executive order. When you talk to the people, the national security officials who are being asked to implement it, they are raising concerns, very serious one. An unprecedented number of American diplomats, foreign service officers who serve regardless of political conviction, any president and any secretary of state who is appointed, have written saying that this actually hurts America in the long term. It alienates many of our allies, particularly those very much needed in the fight against ISIS. I know from my own reporting that particularly when it comes to the country of Iraq, that's one of the top priorities. Get that country off this list of banned nations because there are so many key allies needed, whether you're talking about military generals, whether you're talking about pilots who are learning how to fly F-16 so they can run bombing missions against ISIS. They're learning to do that in the state of Arizona. They need to be able to enter the United States to actually be able to go through that training. So there are very specific instances, and this blanket ban has caused such a ripple effect for embassies and for officials that need to implement this. And that's putting aside personal feelings. We're talking about practical national security issues. We also saw a letter from former U.S. officials, over 100 of them, ambassadors, defense officials, intelligence officials, saying you are alienating allies and you are actually banning people and countries that have had absolutely nothing to do with a single terrorist attack, certainly not on U.S. soil, since 9/11. So they're saying not only practically does this not match up with the actual threats that are posed, but when it comes to U.S. national security, it's a problem. And I'm not even telling you about some of the U.S. allies who have also flagged this. This has raised a lot of eyebrows. Just UK Prime Minister Theresa May this morning said she was given no heads up when she met with President Trump that he was about to announce a ban that would impact her own citizens, many of whom are dual nationals or green card holders, who they may be UK citizens, but perhaps they came from Sudan or elsewhere and thus were held up at the border or perhaps prevented from entering the United States. And she wasn't given any kind of heads up. So it's the implementation of this that really has caused so many problems.
And even if it's not a ban, though, it is, and we should call it thus. That confusion and concern that you speak to also has been marked in the communication or lack thereof between the White House prior to implementation and the agencies that traditionally would have been consulted here. Lots been made about which administration officials knew what and when might they have known it. And I know that does include, you can tell us now, some reporting regarding Defense Secretary James Mattis.
Yes, Defense Secretary James Mattis was said to be incensed at this executive order, particularly how messily it was rolled out, according to many national security officials. But also, if you look at the signing ceremony, where did it happen? That order wasn't signed at the Homeland Security offices. It was signed at the Pentagon. So the former Marine general, who is now the defense secretary, who is making calls on a daily basis to allies in Iraq to ask them to help in this fight against ISIS, to Muslim majority countries that are absolutely central to the fight against ISIS, whether it's Saudi Arabia or the Emirates or elsewhere, he was put in that uncomfortable position of watching the President of the United States sign something that, whether or not it was legally worded to be so, was largely interpreted as a Muslim ban. So that caused some diplomatic problems for him, and he was well aware of the optics of that.
And quickly, I know it perhaps will be something that he will be speaking to when he takes the administration's first trip abroad, headed to Asia today.
Yes, Defense Secretary Mattis headed to both South Korea and to Japan. Really interesting that he picked Asia first up as the first official visit. This really underscores two threats that the U.S. perceives here. Not only China's increased territorial aggressiveness, some would call land grabs, whether it's in the South China Sea or East China Sea, as well as that dispute over some of the military buildup surrounding Taiwan. But secondarily, and perhaps more immediately to U.S. interests, North Korea's increased nuclear capability. U.S. intelligence estimates that by 2020 they will be able to effectively launch a nuclear warhead. We already know they have nuclear capabilities, but the ability to launch one that would threaten U.S. territory is increasing. So talking to our allies in Japan and South Korea is an important part of building up not only the national security defensiveness of the United States, but that of our allies that we are bound by treaty to help defend.
Well, at the White House, where they would prefer you not call it a ban, even if it is, in fact, a ban. Margaret Brennan, we do appreciate it.